Jesus' sacrifice on the cross is a controversial subject, more controversial than you'd think it would be, but it's also a delicate thing, to be teaching your children, because at what point, we're talking about death, and every kid's had different experiences. Some young children have had several family members or friends pass away, and some have not really experienced that at all, or some have had a goldfish or a pass, or die, and some have not, and so we use those opportunities to talk about death and dying, and it can be a very complicated issue for adults to grasp Jesus's death, his Father's part in that, his own willingness to die, the spiritual implications of what is going on, that he did die, why did he have to die, and all of that. So in light of that, one of the things that we're going to focus on in that story in the Gospel of Luke is in chapter 23, is the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And again, like as much of this chapter as you're able to read with your family, I would. Can be very emotional. You've got crowds of people that are rallying against Jesus. They're calling for him to be crucified, and and that is eventually what ends up happening. But what we're going to key into is while he's on the cross, the thing that he says, the first statement that he says in Luke's gospel on the cross is, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." So the questions that you could ask about that statement are, was Jesus lying when he said that? Was he naive? Did he not really know? And we would have to discount both of those ideas, because we know that Jesus knew what was in the heart of man. So he wasn't naive about what was going on around him. Obviously, these people were calling for him to be put where he was, and couldn't lie. He was without sin. So, sorry about the sneeze. So lying wasn't really an option. So when Jesus says, "Father, forgive them, they don't know what to do," there's a powerful lesson there. There's a powerful lesson in forgiveness and in our push to forgive, our need to forgive, even when people do the vilest and most heinous things against us. The example of Jesus here to immediately, and even knowing what's going to be coming next. And he says that to these women that are crying for him. He says, "Don't cry for me, cry for yourselves." So just his external generous outlook on the very people that would be his enemies at this point is just amazing. So his forgiveness, and just that leads, and the underlying thing is the way that he judges them, that he's judging them generously. And that is what we keyed in on the sermon on Sunday was, how do we judge people, and do we judge people generously? And so I think that we see that Jesus did that. He judged very generously, and that's definitely a key to this story. But it's not an isolated thing. Jesus taught his disciples that this is how they should judge people. And let's see, in Luke chapter 6, we've got a great scripture where Jesus is talking about loving your enemies, and I'll pick up in verse 35, and then about how we should judge others. It says, "But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And so I love that analogy, and I think that it opens up a lot of doors for teaching your kids, especially if you can get in the kitchen and you can do something with flour or like brown sugar, just something that can be packed down and really stuffed in, and to see the difference between if somebody's going to be stingy and kind of meagerly put together like a cup of flour, like you can kind of lightly dust it in there, you can sift it, you can make it nice and fluffy and fill up a cup, and how much is that cup of flour versus really packing it in there and letting it overflow a little bit and then dumping that out and seeing the difference. And so when we're going to have to judge things, or we're going to judge people and people's motives and their motivations. When we're in those situations, are we going to be like Jesus, who out of the charity in his heart said, they're doing all of these terrible things to me. They're calling me names, they're insulting me, they're throwing things at me, they're beating me, they're killing me. But Father, they don't really know what they're doing. And just the generosity there. We're going to be like that, just pouring that out, and giving such a good, healthy measure of love. Or are we going to be stingy with that and say, these people, they don't deserve to even live another minute, or they deserve the worst of punishments, and that would be, the example of not judging with generosity. So I think there's, check out the website that we have, www.uticacoc.com. And if you go to the As You Go Family Ministry page, and I think that if you just want to type it in, it's .com/family. And we've started a forum there. So I've got 4 or 5 posts up there, but the forum is so that if you just become a member of the site, which you can sign in through Google or Facebook, then you can also post your ideas or your comments and so on and so forth. So all of our ideas for the As You Go, each week we'll have this lesson, a lesson that's geared more towards parents, but then looking into that, there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 ideas of here's something maybe you could do with your kids to teach this same lesson. So today we're learning about the crucifixion of Jesus, but mainly how even on the cross he was full of forgiveness and generosity, and how are those attitudes that we can embody in ourselves, that we can be generous. And when we measure and when we're going to judge, what does this person deserve? We can either pack up the cup and let it overflow and give that way, or we can just barely fill the cup and be stingy with it and give that way. And Jesus calls for us to be generous in the way that we give, in the way that we love, in the way that we forgive. So may we learn that as parents, and may you be blessed this week as you pass that on to your children.